Welcome back to Scoundrels, Inc., another Star Wars podcast. I am Frank Janish, and this week, right here, today, we are talking about the Season 3 premiere of The Bad Batch. 3-episode premiere, Episode 1, Confined, Episode 2, Paths Unknown, and Episode 3, Shadows of Tantiss. Now, it is just me for right now. Things came up, and would love to have Kevin and Brandon here, but hopefully we'll get them back next week. So, until then, I will just dive in a little deeper into what happened in the premiere of The Bad Batch. If you want to watch a video reaction that I did on our YouTube channel, you can see how I reacted to the episode in real time. That's over on the YouTube channel right now, so you can head over there, follow the link in the show notes, and follow along there with my reaction. But right now, if you've already seen the first 3 episodes of the new season of Bad Batch, spoiler alert if you haven't, because we're going to get into some spoilers here. And this will be a brief breakdown type of episode right now here on the podcast feed. But let's just jump right into episode 1, Confined, and we start off a little bit with the episode drawing some. This is where I will say a little bit of a weak point of the episode. I loved all 3 of these episodes, by the way. That was a great premiere. Animation style is in top form. Love this animation style. I hope they keep doing more shows with this style of animation. I think it is perfect for Star Wars and everything that it allows them to do. That aside, which is really not an aside, but just want to put that out there. But this episode starts off with kind of building some intrigue of what's out there in the jungle on the planet outside of Tantiss, and I don't think they really capitalized on kind of the mystique of it, because if you get later into the episode, or at least in the 3rd episode when they're on their escape, you kind of see like the monster or the creature that was wreaking havoc on this crew that crash landed on the planet. But anyways, you start off there with the episode, and then you get into Omega and what she's been dealing with here at the lab facility, and it's just very drab and mundane. And you see her walk past Crosshair in the hallway, and he's just seems absolutely defeated, and that's very unlike the Crosshair we know and love. The Empire has finally cracked him, and as strong-willed as he is and steadfast as he can be, the Empire, through all their machinations and evil doing, really, has cracked Crosshair and brought him down, and he's so just beaten and defeated. And Omega has that young spirit, I think, and a little bit of naivety with her, in terms of, okay, we're just in another situation. I've been in plenty of those situations before, and we've gotten out of them. And I think she's sort of treating this similarly. And I think it's really to the benefit of Crosshair, obviously, as jumping ahead to the 3rd episode where they escape, and it's that mindset that allows that to happen, because Crosshair was having none of it, But as we get through the beginning of the 1st episode here, you see that Emery's taking blood samples and whatnot, and then it gets back to Nala Se, and she's doing the testing on the blood samples for trying to find a blood sample that can replicate an M count but not have any degradation within the sample, which is basically, can we put Emperor Palpatine's Force, M count into another blood sample without it decreasing the M count, so that Palpatine, and however this is supposed to work, or the idea of it, because obviously we've seen in The Rise of Skywalker what he ultimately came to be in terms of somehow Palpatine has returned, that whole thing, and this is that connection. And I know some people who aren't fans of the sequel trilogy will have their thoughts on that, but this is what it is, and it's Star Wars trying to tie things together. Not trying, but is tying things together. We've seen this in Mandalorian, although that's a little more isolated in terms of Moff Gideon's own personal ambitions. That's somewhat aligned a little bit with what Palpatine and this, what we would come to know as Project Necromancer, which was mentioned in The Mandalorian, in terms of what that what was it called? That council for, was it? I forget the name of the council, Shadow Council or something like that. I'm not sure. But anyways, now let's say doing all this testing, but when it comes to Omega's blood, she's tossing that right in the trash because she knows that because Omega has pretty much is another version of Boba Fett that we've seen in the Clone Wars animated show, as well as obviously Attack of the Clones. But that Boba Fett and Omega have the most pure blood replication, if you will, of Jango Fett, right? So somehow Jango Fett's blood is the key to Palpatine's this project, this experiment that they're conducting here on Tantiss. And Nalase knows this and is doing everything in her power to prevent it from happening, even though she doesn't let Omega in on what's exactly going on. And then, we get to the part with Omega and taking care of some of the animals or the experiments that, Tantiss is following up on. And we get to Batcher, and in true Omega fashion, she starts to befriend this, I forget, I think it's Alukra, I forget the name of the animal exactly, but was not eating, and she, gives it some of her food and kind of befriends it that way, and it's just a very Omega fashion. And as we get through the episode, Omega still has hope of like, okay, I want to try and figure out how do we escape. Crosshair is like, give it up. It's not going to happen. This is the Empire. We are locked down in here. This is just not a thing. And Omega's not hearing any of that. She's remaining hopeful. She's trying to figure it out, and she's going to get them both out of there. And Crosshair's like, you're wasting your time. This is just not going to happen. And then we see the passage of time here with Omega, the market. I didn't really go back and count the days. I think it's like at first I think it's been like a month, I think, and then it just turns into like 3 or 4 months. And Omega, and then there's obviously the relationship too with Emery, her being a clone as well, and I think Omega's trying to find some commonality with Emery to see if she can pull her over to the good side, if you will. But this episode was really, I think, just really set the tone in terms of what Omega and Crosshair are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And one part in the episode was the surprise inspection of Omega's quarters, and she had basically constructed or built her own little straw dhow, and that was confiscated by Emery, and she would later come back and give that back to Omega, even though she told her she was going to destroy it. So I think there's some cracks in Omega and Emery, or in terms of Emery, there's some cracks there where Omega is making some headway into gaining favor with Emery. If not, if anything else, maybe empathy or something like that. I'm not sure. But then there's also the aspect of Nalase and Hemlock. And Hemlock, this dude, God, he's a great villain. He is really a great villain because he's not your typical trying to conquer everything and have all this power. He's doing it through science, right? Through experimentation and what he thinks is the righteous thing to do and for the Empire to make his emperor, happy. But he's doing it through science because he's obsessed with this stuff, and that is in its own way is a villain that we don't really see very often, and if we do, they're very slapsticky and wild and crazy and out of control. That's not Hemlock. Hemlock is very calculated and very precise in what he does, and he's very menacing, and I think in this episode, he has a conversation with Nalase, and is like, you better not be pulling anything because if you do, I'm going to find out. Like, don't think you can pull one over on me. And Nalase is just like, hey, look, my allegiance is to science, trying to speak his language. And he's like, yeah, we'll see about that. I got my eye on you, right? Because he knows that Omega's a wily one, and Nalase will do anything to protect Omega, so he's trying to use that relationship to his advantage in any way that he can. So the episode, I think, pretty much concludes with Omega helping free Batcher and getting him out of the facility. And I knew that this was not going to be the end of Batcher. There was a purpose to building that relationship in the story, and obviously, jumping ahead to episode 3, Batcher comes to the rescue. But this opening episode concludes with Emery bringing back the Straw Doll and all of that. As we get into the second episode, this one brings us back with Hunter and Wrecker and their search for Omega. Now, not a whole lot was happening in this episode, titled Paths Unknown. Hunter and Wrecker searching for Omega. They went through a syndicate to get some information on where Hemlock could be, and it ends up taking them to this planet where they run into some teenage clones, basically, that Hemlock had at the facility on this one planet. I don't know if they mentioned the name. I'm sure they did. I can't remember. But they run into these teenage clones, and they've been, surviving out there in the wilderness after the Empire had an aerial bombardment on the facility because of those the vines that they were being experimented on by the Empire and got out of control, and that's why they nuked the place, basically. But these regs survived, and they run into Wrecker and Hunter, and they try to go to the facility, and danger ensues, and they try and get some coordinates and whatnot, and datapad, and so. But it was cool to see teenage clones again, because I don't think we had seen them since the Clone War episodes. I think when you had like the Cadets episode, and or I think they might have been a little bit more grown up. But anyways, they kind of look like like what Boba Fett did in Clone Wars a little bit. I think these guys might have been a little bit older, but it was cool to see, because like the other question is, when the clones are getting disbanded in the Empire and transitioning from the clone trooper to the stormtrooper, obviously there's clones at all various stages of their lives in terms of, you have your adolescents, your teenagers, and your adults. And we run into teenagers that are just kind of been left out in the galaxy, like what to do. I mean, especially when you have, that's another interesting question to ponder, is what happened to all these clone children at the turn of, or at the rising of the Empire and the transitioning from clone trooper to stormtrooper? What happened to, the 10-year-old, the 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old clone trooper? They were in training, and now it has stopped. So what happens? What is their identity? And really, at the conclusion of this episode, Hunter was like, you can make your own path and be whatever you want to be. You don't have to be a soldier. You can do whatever you want to do. And I like that they didn't mention the name Pabu, but they mentioned the island, and that's where they were dropping them off. So I don't think these two regs, or three rather, I don't think this is the last we've seen of them, because if you go through the trailer, it looks like the Empire finds Pabu, so I think we'll see these guys again, and so, but the action was really great, really cool in this episode, and it was a fun watch, and it was good to see some Wrecker action, some Hunter action, and seeing what they're up to, and kind of how what they're going through to try and find Omega. And at one point in this episode, Hunter was like, help us find our, this person, and because they were part of our crew. And it's really, what he's really saying is she's our family. We're family. And even though he puts it into military terms, but we know that the Bad Batch is a family. Now, the third episode of this premiere, this was great. Shadows of Tantiss. This one was a great episode. This one also really does show the passage of time. I think it's been like 3 or 4 months, which is a decent amount of time to have elapsed. And Omega's got a little bit longer hair and whatnot, and she knows the drill already at the facility, and they kind of redo one of the scenes they did from episode 1 where she's passing Crosshair, but I think she doesn't even look at him at one point. But then we get to a scene where Nala Se is walking in with Hemlock and Emery and Omega, and Hemlock pulls Nala Se. I was like, "Hey, I need you," whatever, something like that. And Emery's already taken Omega's blood sample and is going to about to test it. And Nala Se is like, no, you don't got to do that. I can do that when I get back. And Hemlock's like, nah, she can do it. And Nala Se is like, great. This is not what I needed right now. So she's like, hey, Omega, I need you to bust out of here, because if you don't, you're in grave danger. And so Omega starts to is like, okay, I got to bust out of here, and that's what she starts to do. Meanwhile, the Emperor shows up. Now, this is just good stuff. Ian McDiarmid, as the voice of the Emperor, I will never get tired of this. Everything, whenever the Emperor shows up, it just brings a level of intensity and seriousness, and everything is just raised to another level when the Emperor shows up. It means it's serious. This guy does not show up just for anything. So when he shows up to Tantiss and he's getting basically like a tour of the facility and an update on the project, Hemlock is giddy as a schoolgirl, and he's excited to talk to the Emperor and really be like, hey, make me like, what does he call himself, or wants to be made the Minister of Science or something like that. And so again, it's another self-serving move for Hemlock in terms of power and what he wants to do with these experiments. And so he's like, Project Necromancer, we're working on it. We're pretty close to an M-count replication, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, Omega and Crosshair are busting out of the joint. And it's a fun dynamic between Crosshair and Omega, because Omega's making this thing up as she goes, and Crosshair's like, are you serious? Because that's not what we do. We don't make up. We go in with the plan, we execute the plan, and we succeed. And in this case, that's not exactly what's happening, but, Crosshair's like, all right, we'll do this. And at the end of the day, he does want to get out, but he just lost hope that it can be done. And now that Omega has found this opportunity and has to do it, he's 100% there with Omega and going to make sure this happens. Because I also think that he doesn't want Omega to try and escape alone, and then something happens to her. Deep down inside, he doesn't want anything to happen to Omega, even though he has this rough exterior, even though he said, previously, I belong in here. Things of that nature. So I do like that, he's going to help Omega get out of here, if nothing else. And I don't know that if he's at the level to make the ultimate sacrifice, perhaps, maybe, but that's not what happened here in this moment. And it's a really great, I thought, a very exciting and fun sequence in terms of the escape. And all the while, the Emperor is just like, you will have anything you need, Hemlock, to make sure this project is fulfilled. I do not, he's like, it's of utmost importance to the galaxy, to the Empire, that this succeeds. And I just think it's funny that even though the Jedi have been entirely wiped out, there's no one really in the Empire's way at this point. The Emperor is like, the galaxy everything's at stake in the galaxy. Even though they've conquered the entire galaxy, they rule with an iron fist, the Emperor is still like, it's all at stake. It's all, at risk. And this project, it's imperative for the survival of the Empire. And it's like, buddy, you control everything, but Palpatine, being the smart, devilish guy that he is, he knows that a rebellion will be on the way and whatnot, or that, eventually it'll be on the way. And even though there are cells starting to form around the galaxy in terms of rebellion at this point, probably, right? So anyways, but, Crosshair and Omega escape through the kennel chute that Omega helped Batcher escape from. So they use that to get on the wilderness and whatnot. And again, this whole sequence with Omega and Crosshair was just a really, really, really fun to watch, and just to see how they get out of things and whatnot. And that mysterious creature from the first episode shows up, and then the other beasts that are like Batcher, I forget their name exactly, their species name, starts with an L, Lucra, something like that. And I even said this in my reaction. I was like, I feel like Hemlock releasing those beasts to go after Omega and Crosshair once he finds out they're escaping kind of did them a favor, really, because now they're distracting this big old monster in the jungle. And eventually, Batcher comes to the rescue as Omega and Crosshair are getting pinned down by the Imperial commandos. And he comes to the rescue, and they ended up hijacking the very ship those commandos came in on, and I thought that was really funny and a really great turn of events. And Batcher goes with them, and then Hemlock's like, all right, you know what, screw it, shoot them out of the sky. But at that point, there's been this ticking clock of the vials of blood being tested in the lab, and Emery sees that Omega's blood is the key, is the one, and she rushes to Hemlock and says, you can't destroy them. Omega is the key. And Hemlock is like, all right, let them go, or don't destroy them. We need them alive, and that helps with the escape of Crosshair and Omega, and that's partly Emery's doing, really. And so this is a great 3 episodes to start. We got what's been going on with Omega and Crosshair. We got what's been going on with Hunter and Wrecker. And then we start getting into the swing of things with the Crosshair Omega escape from Tantiss, and now setting up that Hemlock is going to be chasing after Omega, and it's be interesting to see where other characters come into play, namely Asajj Ventress. What we saw in the trailer. So what role is she going to have to play later on in this series, and when will that be? Because next week's episode is titled A Different Approach. I have really no idea what that could be about. And then episode 5 is called The Return. Is that Asajj Ventress? That might be a little too on the nose, but in terms of being a little meta, but who knows? And then episode 6 and 7 come out, Infiltration and Extraction. So I'm just really looking forward to this season and see what they do and how far the Empire gets with Project Necromancer, because obviously when we get to Mandalorian, which is decades later from when the Bad Batch story takes place, what is the state of the project? What happens here? What happens with Nala Se? Because Hemlock knows that she aided Omega's escape, and what repercussions will that have, and will that entice Omega into a trap, or lull her into a trap, or what have you? So a lot of interesting things still come down the pike with the season of Bad Batch, the final season, after I've been getting so invested in this season. Anyways, I've talked long enough. Great episode, great vibes. Again, shout out to the Kiners. The music is phenomenal. The technical aspects of this show, the animation, the framing, all of that, the kind of the rack focusing they do, how they really treat it like a, very cinematically. It's phenomenal work in terms of animation and sound design and music and all of that. I love how well made this show has been from day one. and it's only gotten better from episode 1, season 1, all the way up till right now, and I'm sure, this whole season is going to be absolutely amazing, and looking forward to what's going to happen next. I said The Return, episode 5 is titled The Return, and I was like, oh, Asajj Ventress, but what if that's our buddy Tech? What if that's Tech? I hope so. He's got to come back at some point. I mean, it could also be Echo and Rex, and, so it could be a number of things. Anyways, we'll have to find out in the coming weeks. I'm excited to find that out. If you want to watch my reaction to these episodes every week, you can find that on our YouTube channel, and also, stay tuned to this podcast feed for breakdowns and discussions and talks on further Bad Batch episodes, hopefully with Kevin and Brandon in the future, hopefully starting next week. But until then, I have been Frank Janish. This has been Scoundrels Inc.'s Bad Batch recap, spoiler discussion, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. But until next time, we will see you next time. This is how I'm ending the episode? Anyways, I'll see you next week.
Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.